While the 19th century established a cooling culture as a convenience, the 20th century integrated refrigeration deeper into business practices and daily life, making it a necessity. Here's a list of some of the key developments in the beginning of the 20th century. First, the supremacy of harvested ice fades with rising public health concerns associated with contaminated ice. Then new technologies introduce safer and less expensive refrigeration products. Finally, a change in infrastructure heralds a new age of refrigeration transport. By the beginning of the 20th century, industries such as meat packers and brewers were well on the way to switching to mechanized refrigeration and ice making because of its increased dependability, and especially for brewers, public concerns over the contamination from harvested ice. This business trend continued to increase, and in 1914, more plant ice was being produced than harvested ice. In that year, 26 million tons of plant ice was being produced in the U.S. each year, and in comparison, 24 million tons of ice was being naturally harvested. I've mentioned the issue of tainted ice a few times, so let me say a few words about public sanitation in the early 20th century. Thanks to the introduction of Louis Pasteur's germ theory, for the first time, people understood the scientific connection between microbes and disease, dramatically changing public perceptions of risk and igniting a public sanitation movement. As shown in this photo of turn-of-the-century New York City, street cleaners were marshaled to clean up the debris of the streets, and they needed to be protected by police officers because the activity was so novel. Meanwhile, the growing ice trade was colliding with industrialization and the squalid conditions in cities. Soon there were claims that natural ice was contaminated with pollution and sewage. Although the threat was probably overstated because ice crystals tend to expel pollutants, newspaper articles reported the concern, and a number of ice-making operations were even shut down. One clear beneficiary of the public sanitation movement were self-contained electric refrigerators, powerful symbols of modernity and cleanliness. They were invented for home use as early as 1913. Here are some examples of early refrigerator models. In 1923, the company Frigidaire introduced the first self-contained unit for general consumption, and in 1927, General Electric introduced the monitor top refrigerator named after the famous Civil War gunboat whose gun turret had a similar look. Then, in the 1930s, the introduction of Freon revolutionized the refrigerator market during the 40s and 50s. Freon and other synthetic refrigerants were a key turning point because they allowed for safer, smaller, lighter, and cheaper refrigerators, which were perfect for residential use. Post-war grocery stores also began to increase the amount of aisle space dedicated to freezers. Indeed, this trend has steadily continued until now, when supermarkets report an average of 100 yards of freezer frontage per store. One key contributing factor for the growth in supermarket freezers was the invention of a flash freezing technique pioneered by Clarence Birdseye in 1930. This speedy freezing process for meats and vegetables eliminated the large ice crystals that pierce the walls of plant and animal cells. Instead, the flash freezing process created small crystals that preserve the integrity and the taste of frozen foods. In addition to improved quality and flavor, marketers touted frozen foods as work-freest, or labor-saving amenities for homemakers, as shown by this Birdseye ad from a 1949 edition of Life magazine. Meanwhile, refrigerated trucks benefited from the same technological advancements that were transforming household refrigerators. So by 1949, trucks were outfitted with portable refrigeration units. These units could be easily attached to trucks or to semi-trailers, and they were safer and more reliable than ever before. And the same principles for effective cooling that were learned from refrigerated rail transport could be applied to trucks. For example, this chart shows how cargo needs to be stacked to allow for proper air circulation. But due to the poor quality of interstate roads, actually the non-existence of interstate roads, these early refrigerated vehicles were reserved for delivering food the last few miles from seaports and train depots to their final destination. In 1956, this situation changed with the enactment of the Federal Aid Highway Act. The law authorized the construction of a 41,000-mile network of interstate highway that would span the nation. In doing so, refrigerated trucks, and in fact all trucks, could compete over long distances with rail cars. Now trucks could deliver cargo directly from loading dock to loading dock, no matter the distance between food producer, manufacturer, or retail store, cutting out the extra handling steps required by rail transport. By the end of the 20th century, new refrigeration technologies and infrastructure had improved and tightened the cold chain at every stage, from the farm to the manufacturer warehouse to retail freezer aisles to a homeowner's kitchen, and at every transport step along the way. What amazes me is that, for the most part, the food refrigeration technologies since the 1950s are with us today. By reviewing this history of food refrigeration, I hope you appreciate just how much things have changed, how much they haven't changed, and how much they should change to address the challenges of the future.